Excellent. Looks like folks are getting use of the web chat. You are also welcome to submit Q&A. My name is JD. I am the CEO of International Bird Rescue, and tonight I'll be assisted by Ariana Gastelum, who is our Marketing Communications Associate, and Cheryl Reynolds, who is our Volunteer Programs Associate. Looks like we've got a lot of folks from California. We've got Taiwan, fantastic. Olympia, Washington, Mendocino, excellent. Looks like it is really coming together. This should be a lot of fun for those of you who are birders. Actually, if you are a birder, please go ahead and mark that, because what I'm going to be doing tonight is showing a lot of species and hoping that we can all guess together. One of the best parts of winter season for bird rescue is the huge variety of species that come in. Excellent. We've got a lot of birders here. And hello, Bart. Nice to see you here. Excellent, Kat. I am also a bird nerd. Fantastic. All right, without further ado, we are recording tonight, so this will be available later on. Thank you and welcome to Bird Rescue's webinar series. We're trying to do a variety of talks throughout the year. Some of them will be more technical and some of them will be more fun. This one is meant to be kind of a lighter tone, learning a little bit more about the kind of work we do in winter at Bird Rescue. All right, so I already introduced myself. Here's a photo of me on a snowy plover survey day, and those are baby snowy plovers along with San Francisco Bay Bird Observatory, a key partner of Bird Rescue's. Pretty amazing experience if you ever get the chance. Bird Rescue was founded in 1971 in response to an oil spill actually outside of the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. And today we see ourselves as a global conservation nonprofit organization striving to be a voice for water birds specifically in a changing world. We do this through three key programs. We are best known probably for our emergency response, especially oil spills. That was the start of the organization, and we've responded to well over 250 large-scale crises involving wildlife, especially birds, around the whole world. Rehabilitation and research are a key part of our work as well, and these days probably form the largest portion of our work. And a lot of the stories tonight and the images are going to come from our rehab program. We also have a growing conservation and education program. So this is really trying to educate and engage with the public, like you all tonight. Hopefully we will teach you a few things that you would be able to share with friends, and that you'll learn a little bit along the way as well. So our mission is to, in fact, to inspire people to take action, to act toward balance with the natural world by rescuing water birds in crisis. A few of the details you'll learn tonight will probably give you some keys to how to actually take action yourself. And we hope that you will learn to recognize a few of the challenges that we see of birds, especially in the winter. What do we mean by winter season? Some of you might have been imagining something like this. This is, in fact, a very rare occasion, but this patient did come into care. This was an American white pelican found in the Tahoe area in the snowstorm. Was not obviously not supposed to be there. Fortunately, that bird was found by folks who brought it into proper care. It was transferred to us, and that pelican actually made full recovery and was released successfully. When we talk about winter season, we're not usually talking about snow. Our two wildlife centers are located in San Francisco Bay Area and the Los Angeles area, neither of which see snow very often, although I can remember a day back in the 90s when I was in my office in downtown San Francisco and snow fell. Didn't stay on the ground, but it did in fact fall. When we talk about winter season, we're usually talking about more extreme more extreme storms, especially rain, high winds, impacts of El Nino and the like, that cause a number of challenges for birds. More frequently, rather than a pelican in the snow, we'll see a bird like this, I will not name this species. I'll give you all a chance. So if anyone knows what species you're looking at, this particular bird is looking pretty rough, has some pretty bad feathers, is looking a little bit wet, not at its best and healthiest. I see Tim knows the 4-letter codes. I'll see if anyone else wants to write this species' full name. We did a little retrospective, and it shows for over the past 5 years, we have had about 1,500 birds come in between December 1st and the end of February every year. That's right, northern fulmar. A lot of folks don't recognize this bird who are not big birders because it kind of looks like a gull with a broken beak. This is one we've had a hard time getting the public to engage on when we get a large number of them in. People just have a more natural affinity to pelicans and murres and various kinds of ducks and even cormorants. But for whatever reason, we have a hard time getting folks to love these poor northern fulmars. It's about 309 birds per year, and you can actually see at the bottom there that the number of birds coming into care in Southern California in the winter is actually larger. I think that has to do with our proximity, closer proximity to the beach. We are further inland in Northern California, and actually there are a larger number of wildlife rehabilitation centers that birds could end up at, and only the ones with most critical care would be transferred to our center located in Fairfield, California. Also, as we evolve in this talk tonight, you'll see that some of the key causes of admission, the problems that birds are facing, are more prevalent in the Southern California area, and we'll talk more about that as we get there. All right, so here we go. The causes of admission for birds in the wintertime. You can see that the two blue categories, or the two lighter blues, are both kinds of contamination. What I just hinted at in the last slide was Southern California actually has something called natural seep. This means that there are areas where oil, perhaps from being pulled from the ground or perhaps not, but there are areas where it naturally seeps out. When weather gets rough, there are these kind of natural caps that have formed that get ripped off, and the oil enters the water again. How do we distinguish natural seep from an oil spill? There's actually a way to test oil. We can collect oiled feathers from birds when they come in, and there's a way to test basically all commercially produced oil has something like a fingerprint. You can identify where that oil came from. In the absence of that fingerprint, then you can know that it is a natural oil type. We do see large numbers of birds coming in from the Santa Barbara and Ventura areas. It also happens in Northern California, closer to Monterey Bay. And these birds can be quite numerous, well over 300 oiled birds in a season, but it also can be a lot fewer than that. This year has been a pretty typical year for that. Contamination is not only oil, petroleum products. It can also be vegetable oil or fish oil, glue, other things, human waste. There's all sorts of things that birds find their way into, and they require different kinds of cleaning, but bird rescue's specialty is and has always been cleaning birds and getting them back to their waterproof capacities. You can see that the second largest category is unknown trauma. That means a bird with some sort of break. We can tell that there has been some sort of impact or something basically causing a direct injury. This could be a window collision. This could be being hit by a car. It could be a really hard landing. One of the challenges for water birds specifically, that when they are flying overhead, sometimes even the reflection of a parking lot can seem like a water body, and we see quite frequently birds that do not belong in parking lots being found there because they crash landed and became injured. Interestingly enough, the single largest cause for birds coming into care year round is much smaller part of it. Fishing hook and fishing line injuries are the single largest reason birds come into care, other than being orphaned, baby birds. But fishing hooks and fishing line are a smaller portion of the work we do in the winter. Starvation, and you can actually see birds that are directly tied to stormy weather causes, like that white pelican in the snow, are actually a pretty small proportion. And then, of course, there's a pretty significant proportion of birds that it's just not knowable what caused the problem. Please do feel free to enter your questions as we go. This is more fun to interact, but we're going to be going pretty deep into various bird species. So, of course, the first and foremost winter cause, as I said, is oiling. This is actually a photo from the 1971 spill. Anyone want to take a guess at what species is under all that oil? It is one of the more physically identifiable species, although it might be hard to tell without being able to see any of the colors. Yes, Elijah Gordon has got it right. See, a lot of folks are using the shorthand. So we have insider true bird lovers here. Yes, that is in fact a surf scoter. Surf scoters are one of the most common species to see in an oil spill in the ocean. And that is because the oil leaks out of a boat, probably a little bit out to sea. It moves toward shore and is literally being churned up by the waves, exactly where surf scoters, western grebes, common murres, exactly where these kinds of birds live. That's their normal hunting ground and living ground, and is a reason why we see these species perhaps most of all during marine spills. All right, this one is another of the causes I just showed you. And this is actually a patient from this winter. Rather unusual patient, so I will give folks a chance to guess what you're seeing, but you can obviously see what's wrong. I've been using this photo for presentations with kids, and we play a game called What's Wrong with This Picture. It was actually birders who spotted this, not just because it is a rather unusual species to see off of LA's coast, but also because obviously that bird is wrapped in fishing line. This is a loon. Yes, Madison gets it first. Yellow-billed loon. This is a rather rare visitor, not unusual, but has been actually getting quite a reputation this season. The exact same species was spotted in Las Vegas in the famous Bellagio pool where they have their water show. It hit the news in a much bigger way than the one that we saw. And fortunately, in both cases, it was humans making good decisions that were in favor of the bird. They turned off the fountains and the water displays and actually relocated that bird. So this bird did come into care thanks to birders who were watching carefully. I would say that some were frustrated not to be able to see this bird, rare bird, when it was being announced, but of course its care and well-being were most important, and we did get to release this bird back out a couple of miles from shore in order to give it the best possible chance to get back on its migratory route. All right. This is another rarer patient. I'm not going to share the gory photo, but I will say that human cruelty is unfortunately a not uncommon cause for admission. You see that statistically, it's not one of the biggest, but this bird actually came in just a few weeks ago. If you follow our social media, you probably have already heard of her. Her nickname is Blue, and we are calling her Blue because the leg band that she's wearing is blue. She came in with a very severe injury. And apologies for those of you who are queasy, but I think it's important that you be aware of the kinds of things that can happen to birds. This bird came in with a laceration, basically from the entire pouch being separated from the neck. Somebody, once again, it was a good Samaritan who noticed as she was trying to eat fish, they were just falling right out because the pouch was severed. I wish I could say this was the first time we've seen this. In fact, 2014, there was another bird that was nicknamed Pink the Pelican that had a pink band and had the exact same problem. Good news for brown pelicans is they are remarkable healers. This bird has already been through 2 surgeries, well over 400 stitches, both on the inside and outside to reattach the pouch. This is something that has been done in our care more than 2 times. And in fact, there was a problem in the last few years where there seemed to be someone doing this in a serial manner. At the time, we have tried to pursue a reward system, trying to get information. Bottom line here is just asking you to spread the word, to have people keep their eye out. Birds with problems like this can be helped in many cases, but the sooner they come into care, the better. This bird would have been starving, would have been struggling with potential for secondary infections, and you're going to see quickly Blue eating right after her first surgery. You can see the line actually on her pouch where the stitches are still in there. She has become a patient favorite of our team. She is an adult bird, but is very, very small for a brown pelican, and actually pretty bad tempered. And one thing that actually maybe you wouldn't know about rehabilitation is we want wild birds to stay wild. Them having a bad temper and not wanting to be handled is exactly the kind of behavior we'd be looking for. So that is a sign of strength. It is a sign of having the right level of avoidance of humans. In fact, this bird specifically needs to learn to stay away from humans even more so. Oops, saw that. This was a weird one. That anyone want to tell me what bird they see in the photo? While you guess what species this is, this was a very, very odd one. You can see on the right-hand side, this is one of those hair ties, kind of elastic hair ties. Folks with long hair maybe tie their hair back while running. Yes, this is in fact a ruddy duck. Everyone's got it. There was a bird that literally came in with this tie, bridled like a horse. The tie was through the bird's mouth and caught on the back of its head. How that's possible, I really don't know. But of course, that would have caused the bird to starve and eventually pass just from that. I can't tell you the number of times after this happened that I see these hair ties on the ground, on trails, in parking lots, just about everywhere you go. If you do nothing else in changing your behavior after tonight from this presentation, I ask you to pick these up and cut them before putting them into a proper trash. Anything with a loop, we've been talking for years about the plastic 6-pack containers as what a danger that they can be. This one is one I just see over and over again. Glad that this was your favorite bird, Eli. This was also our longtime director, Jay Holcomb's favorite bird. Kat Ross actually has a great question about pelicans. Are they easy to handle or are they feisty? I think it's kind of a mixed bag. We are all wild birds generally are feisty. And as I said before with Blue, the pelican, she was exceptionally feisty. Some species like American white pelicans can be really hard to handle. They're kind of known to have bad tempers. I consider that brown pelicans can often be easier, but generally speaking, we're literally looking for them to be snappy and evasive of us. That's the way it ought to be. Sometimes we get asked, are the birds appreciative? Are they grateful for the work you're doing? We don't want them to be. We don't want them to see us as a source of positive things. In fact, if birds approach us because they see us as a source of food, we actually do a process called hazing and deterrence, which basically reteaches them not to approach humans because, of course, not all humans are safe. Right. I see that Ariana is answering a bunch of the questions. I'm going to keep an eye out for those as well, but please do feel free to keep asking. All right. So we have in recent years seen over 70 different species during winters. I should say that bird rescue has the potential to see 150 or so different water birds just on the Pacific coast of the United States. We have seen numerous other kinds of water birds around the world. But also, though birds are in our name, we actually during oil spills will wash muskrats and beavers and turtles and even other kinds of birds that don't live near the water, like bald eagles and owls and falcons, basically year round. If there is an animal that is contaminated, our centers are a really good place to bring them. During winter, gulls are the single most plentiful number to see, with grebes coming in quite close second. And you can see from there it goes cormorants and pelicans, and then diving ducks and loons, with murres and coots being a category all in themselves. Go back there for a second. Did not bring in special photos of gulls, but I am going to feature most of the rest of what you see here. All right, so here are 4 kinds of grebes. The single most numerous is the one in the top right, left corner, excuse me. First off, can anyone tell me what is the 2 species on the top row? I'm going to actually stop for a second and say, Lois, thank you very much for your reminder. Not only are the hair tie loops and elastics, anything with sort of a stretch can be very dangerous. In more recent years, it has been COVID masks. When you throw a COVID mask away, please be sure to cut those ties. Once again, can become a danger for wildlife, not just for birds. All right, so I see a lot of folks pointing out that is a Western and a Clark's grebe in the top row. What are you looking for to see the difference? Those of us who are real bird nerds are gonna share our knowledge. And I will say that working at Bird Rescue and being up close to these birds really gives you a great lesson in how to identify things, even without your binoculars. Yeah, so we've got all 4. Actually, I've got Western grebe and Clark's grebe on the top. I see a correct identification of a pied-billed grebe on the bottom right, but I have not yet seen a correct identification of the bottom left bird. Bill color is a key differentiation between the birds. You can see the Western grebe has kind of a yellowy green, and the Clark's grebe, I call it kind of macaroni and cheese orange. The other key difference is actually where the white goes on their faces. Missing from pretty much every bird guide I've ever seen is that you can actually identify gender of these larger grebes, the Western and the Clarks, by the shape of their bill. Females have a thinner bill that bends ever slightly upward, almost like an avocet, and males have a bill that comes out more straight like a knife. I think in both cases, these are males. I actually should have included pictures of females as well, but maybe some of the other photos will show that. Great, I am now seeing eared grebe. A lot of folks struggle with eared grebe and horned grebe, and I will say that from watching them now in the pools in the yard, this is a species that I have learned to see even without my binoculars, just by shape and behavior. Lots of folks like to joke that you know it's an eared grebe when it disappears the moment you catch sight of it in a lake or a pond. And this really is kind of the order of how frequently we see these birds. Westerns most of all, and then those others coming in a little bit less frequently during the winter. Cormorants I talked about. So this is in the order, once again, of most frequently seen in winter to least frequently seen. Interestingly enough, it changes. So I'll wait for an identification of left to right of these 3 kinds of cormorants. The one on the right is the one we see least frequently. On the left is what we see most frequently in the winter, but actually it switches, and the one in the middle becomes most frequent the rest of the year. All right, so left to right, if we start on the left-hand side, this one right here has a bluish eye, obviously not in breeding plumage, which takes away some of the tricks. I see some folks, there's just no tricking them. What you are seeing is a Brandt's cormorant, which is usually seen near the coastal areas. Double-crested cormorants, which are the ones you'd see inland as well as on the coast. And then pelagic cormorants, a little tinier. They get a reddish face during their breeding plumage, and all 3 get really gorgeous plumage when they are in breeding season. Pelagic cormorants, again, being the least frequent in care. Really interesting, and we're about to head into this season again, springtime and summer for Brandt's cormorants. If you live in the LA or Orange County areas, you'll want to be on the lookout for these birds on the beaches. There is a kind of parasite that has historically been seen only in raptors. It doesn't seem to affect all three kinds of common cormorants on the West Coast, but is getting these Brandt's cormorants pretty severely. It causes quite a bit of damage and actually does kill them. We have been able to collect samples from birds that did not survive, and we are working with the state of California to try to understand the direct impacts of that parasite in hopes of figuring out a way to treat it as time goes on. So Brandt's cormorant, double-crested cormorant, and pelagic cormorant. All right, now we're going to talk about dabblers. This is ducks and geese that generally have that floating up on top of the water. They tip down but can't go below the water because they're essentially, their bodies are buoys. Anyone want to identify the birds that you see on this slide? Of course, in the wintertime, that's when a lot of migratory ducks are in various areas of California that you wouldn't find them other times of year. Both of these are migratory species. I am seeing correct identification of a widgeon, so an American widgeon that's a beautiful male in breeding plumage, and then a brant, formerly known as black brant, kind of a small goose, and actually used to be quite plentiful. This is something I only learned quite recently. Brants used to be quite plentiful in San Francisco Bay, and their favorite food is eelgrass. And so when the amounts of eelgrass went down, brants stopped coming here. Apparently, one of the most critical sites for them is in Puget Sound, which is a huge stopover for them. And I also learned recently from colleagues in Puget Sound that their truly ideal habitat is where there is a lot of eelgrass and exposed sand that they can ingest to help put the right grit level in their gizzards. So San Francisco, I know, has been doing quite a bit of effort to restock and repopulate eelgrass. So long as there is exposed sand as well, we might see an increase in the number of brants coming again. Two more dabblers. I will say that the one on the right-hand side is going to be a trick or trickier because it is a female. The one on the left is probably a little bit more obvious, both by color and shape of its bill. Would love to, again, get people guessing, and feel free to ask any questions as they come up. Really critical to care, by the way, if you think about dabbling ducks floating on the water, most often eating vegetation. The feeding practices we have for these birds are also quite different from their diving peers. We'll get to diving ducks quite soon. Yes, that is a northern shoveler. And I'm still waiting to see if anyone, northern shoveler is the bird on the left. Does anyone know what species this female is? I see one guess of cinnamon teal. It is not a cinnamon teal. Kind of does look like a mallard. The hint would be maybe we all tend to know the males. It's funny how through years the bright colors are how we identify. And I've really enjoyed recent years' focus on not only recognizing but honoring female birds as well. Let's see, well, I might, for the sake of moving on, I'm going to say that this is a gadwall. This is there we go. Madison guessed it right as I said it. This is a female gadwall. I find that gadwalls distinguish themselves by being about as pretty in a subtle way as any duck can be. They're not flashy with colors, but both the male and the female have these absolutely amazing details. Pretty rare species for us to see and care, but there you go. All right, we're going to dive into the diving ducks now. I put these four all on the same slide because they are all relatives, and some of the more challenging ID bits are more obvious here. I'm going to go ahead and give away the top left corner as a ring-necked duck, which a lot of folks say should be called the ring-billed duck. But this photo, if you look closely, you can actually see the neck, the bright purpley red color of the ring on this neck, which was how the bird got named. You can see that these birds all have yellow eyes. They are in the Aethia genus of ducks. Does anyone want to guess the others? How about the top right, the one with the brown head and the white circle? Yes, that is a goldeneye, in this case, a common goldeneye. Interestingly enough, female and male goldeneyes do not migrate together. They migrate by sex. It seems that they only enjoy each other's company during breeding season, and then otherwise stay apart in groups by gender. And it looks like we already had a guess of the bottom row as well. That is a greater and lesser scop. So one of the tricks I remember when I just could not see the difference, I was at Lake Merritt, which is in Oakland, California. And I said it would really help. I was talking to an Audubon group leader. It would really help if both kinds were here together. And they explained to me the rounder head with the greenish tinge, which is more common of the greater scop. You can see that on the bottom left. And the purplish tinge with a little notch at the back of the head, almost like the bird has been wearing a baseball cap. That is more common in, or is the indication of a lesser scop. You can also look at the width of the nail on the tip of the bird's bill. These photos don't make that particularly easy to see, but you can definitely see the relationship between these four species by seeing these photos together. All right, so perhaps a little more unusual birds. Why don't we guess, what do we have here? One of these is a repeat from a little earlier, but now, whoops, now not covered in oil. Any guesses on the birds that we have in this? All right, yes, we got the surf scoter in the front, one of my favorite photos of a surf scoter. And the bottom right is an easy one. That is a male bufflehead. Does anyone know what that female bird is in the top corner? And yes, there is a ruddy duck photobombing that surf scoter. Does anyone know what this one is? Has the bill shape of a scoter, which is a clue. Yes. And Madison, I think you're just sending to the hosts and panelists, so I'll just repeat your answers. But yes, it is a white-winged scoter female. Again, not as plentiful, not as common a species to see as the surf scoters in care, but we do get them. And buffleheads are among our favorite. We see them every year. All right, now we're really going to the harder level. These are a bit rarer in many cases. I purposely made one photo a lot larger so that you could see it. This is a very rare patient for us, but has one that I've seen at least a handful of times since I've been in with bird rescue. And that's about 8 years now. Yes, that is a long-tailed duck. Not seeing the tail, this one actually didn't have those long tail feathers just because it had pretty bad plumage when it came into care. How about the two birds on the right-hand side? You know, I always struggle with the mergansers, at least when they are not in the males in full breeding plumage. That actually is a red-breasted merganser. At least that's how it's labeled in our database. They can be very, very subtle, the female common merganser and the red-breasted merganser. And yes, that is a redhead duck, another relative of the golden or yellow-eyed Aethia ducks, and one of my favorites. Good tip there, Tim. Thank you. Red-breasted merganser has a blurry neck transition. Interestingly enough, every few years we end up with baby mergansers, usually common mergansers, sometimes other kinds. They are voracious eaters, and they are some of the few patients that we have not been able to figure out to get to eat thawed, frozen dead fish. which means that we have to go from pet store to pet store when we have these merganser ducklings in care, buying up all of the minnows we can get. And they, I like to joke that it's like the scene in Jurassic Park when the velociraptors are hunting. They are absolutely voracious. They will eat up every last little bit. And it's rather expensive to raise these babies. But we do what we must. And we're grateful to have the support of donors and volunteers that makes it possible. All right, so when it comes to not just the families of birds or the groupings, but actually the individual species, in winter, it turns out Western grebes and Western gulls are by far the most numerous. These are birds that are present year-round in the places that we are, and obviously they are in areas where there are challenges. You can see Brandt's cormorants, brown pelicans, California gulls follow thereafter, and it kind of goes down from there. Kinds of loons and coots and ruddy duck actually being the duck most frequently seen in winter. This is actually from just a few weeks ago, our Northern California Center. Hopefully you can hear the water running. This is what it looks like to have a bunch of MERS in care together. One of my favorites, this time of year, I tend to keep my window open, even if it's cold, because you can get that raucous call that MERS are so well known for. And they really one of our favorite birds from the very beginning. They are, in fact, the smaller bird in our logo. And one of the things we love most about them, some of you may already know this, but when a baby orphaned MER comes into care and we have adults in a pool like this, we will actually put the baby in the pool with the adults. The baby will go from adult to adult until one of them agrees to take it on, and that becomes basically a surrogate parent-child relationship that allows us to release both those birds sooner because we know that bird will be taking care of the baby. Otherwise, we would have to wait till it grew to adulthood. Yes, and we are often getting reports of people seeing penguins. Tim's comment of Northern Hemisphere flighted penguins. They do, in fact, look a lot like penguins, more closely related to puffins. They're in the auk family, and they are definitely a species that we see quite frequently with oil spills, with fishing line challenges, and some years actually with large-scale starvation crises. 2015, 2016, and I believe 2018 all brought in well over 500 MERS each of those years. Madison's question is, do we get many other alcids? These are definitely the most numerous. I would say that pigeon guillemots are second in line. We have gotten a variety of merlets and auklets. Those are less frequent. We've had puffins and rhinoceros auklets and things. So absolutely we do. You think about the proximity of where birds live. The closer they are to land, the more likely they are to be rescued or even seen in distress. Deep sea birds like shearwaters and storm petrels and a lot of these other tiny auklets and things, they live really far from shore. If they were to have a problem, a waterproofing issue or an injury, it would be less likely that they would find their way into care for obvious reasons. So that's a critical part of what we do here. What Jacqueline asks, what caused the large-scale starvation events? There was a study of the first of those. It seemed quite connected to food, and its science and study of this. There were lots of folks comparing notes. Ultimately, the idea was that El Nino, causing what is called the ocean blob. It's a movement of warm water in the ocean. If that warm blob is present in a place where it wouldn't normally be, the warm water is something that fish do not like. They swim down and away from it. During the fall or late summer and fall season, one of the other interesting things about the natural history of MERS is that once the fledging happens, basically nesting on cliffs. The baby is raised to a certain size and it's ready to fledge and go down into the water. Mom goes off and recuperates and does her plumage changing, molting. Dad takes the chick out into the water. He also is going through a catastrophic molt, meaning that he doesn't have as much going on with flight feathers, either to fly or to dive as deeply. If those birds, the dad and the baby, are in that warmer water area, the thought is no fish. They have no way of relocating. They obviously can't move the chick except by swimming. And so then they would be slowly dealing with a starvation event, beaching themselves, and that's when they come into care. Interestingly, one of those 3 years, it was mostly chicks being found. And in fact, I remember one being left by somebody in a paper bag on the steps of a fire station. One of the other pieces I'd love to impart on folks is that, really being willing to step in and not just do part of the job. That bird was lucky enough to be found, but you could imagine that could have gone another way altogether. The band, there's a question about the banding you're seeing. You are seeing a red band on one of these birds. In order to separate and identify the various patients in care, especially when many are of the same species, we have a temporary leg band that we add. It's just made of Tyvek. It has the patient's number. There's about 6 different colors. And so when you have about 30 of these in a pool, you're going to have about 5 or 6 reds, 5 or 6 greens, and actually learning to recognize the differences is one of the special skills of our staff and volunteers that I find absolutely amazing. When you've got 30 birds, all relatively looking the same, many of them having similar colored bands, it can be quite a challenge to keep up with that. I'm just going to check the questions one more time while we are. There we go. Pamela asked the question. I'm glad I didn't move on yet. So you can see actually some distinctions in color patterns. A few of these birds have what I like to call kind of a graphite colored head. You can even see a line right by their eye. Those are full adults. The one right in the front there, you can see a bird that has a lot of white, not fully in that breeding plumage. Those are younger birds. So males and females, in most seabirds, there is not a sexual dimorphism. There are some where that's true, but most of the time, the distinctions you're seeing are between young birds that have not yet come to breeding plumage. And actually year-round, those birds with the full graphite colored heads will also fade to or molt to look just like the young. So it's sort of an indication of a breeding aged adult as opposed to a young bird or an out of breeding season bird. Great question from an anonymous attendee. If you do come across a bird in need, what are the steps one should take to get it to care? The part of the question there, part of the answer there is going to be your level of comfort and what you have with you. I like to say if you're going to be walking on the beach, I think that's where you're most likely to come in to contact with a bird in distress. Having a towel, having a jacket, having something that you don't mind laying over a bird, that can be a way for you to intervene directly yourself. Probably more likely you'd be on the lookout for a park ranger or a lifeguard or some sort of public agency official. They generally know who to call. I would like to be able to say that one size fits all, but actually it's a very complicated matter depending on where you live. If you live in Contra Costa County or Alameda County in Northern California, for example, there are no animal control resources for wild animals. Those resources are taxed so much with home pets, dogs and cats, that they don't have the ability to come intervene with wild animals. Generally speaking, getting a bird into care, especially one that has beached itself, is probably already weak. You always want to be careful. Where is the weapon? Most seabirds, the weapons are their beaks. Sometimes it's claws, sometimes it's other things. You always want to be very, very careful, but covering that bird with a towel and making sure that it gets put in a safe, warm, quiet place like a cardboard box with holes in it, and away from children and cats and dogs and things. Again, keeping it warm, trying to get it into care as quickly as possible is the key. There's more information on our website. If you go to birdrescue.org and click on the button that says found a bird, that will give you proper guidance. Deirdre asks, and I will answer one more question before I move on to the next slide. Do you ever get any wading birds or osprey? Since I'm focusing tonight on winter birds, I would say that wading birds are quite rare in winter. I'm trying to think why that might be. Probably because they are in larger flocks, things like curlew and many kinds of plover. They actually migrate in large groups and are not seen as readily around as they would be in spring and summer. Osprey is not a bird I know that we have had in care. It is not our specialty because it is a raptor. It would probably be better in a raptor-focused center. That said, if an osprey was oiled, they would definitely need to come to a place like Bird Rescue to be washed before being transferred to a location that had the right facilities for them. But absolutely, we do work with wading birds, herons, egrets, shorebirds of all varieties. We're just focused today on the ones that come in mostly in winter. Move on there. All right, so now we're going to go to the extra rare birds. And thank you, Bart, for reminding folks about safety. Eyes poking bills. You do not want birds coming close to your face or anywhere tender. These are rather unusual species in care. Why don't we just start with the first one? The bird on the right-hand side, or left-hand side, excuse me, kind of looks like a gull. There are some clues. I should have probably zoomed in just a wee bit. I really do have a strong group of birders tonight. Thank you, Madison. That is a black-legged kittiwake. We like to think of it as a cute-faced gull, a gull species or gull family. We have actually had a few of these in care just this year. We'll take the middle two together. They look almost identical. I will draw attention to the bill color. And I will say that these are both vagrants that you would not expect to see in the Bay Area or the Southern California area. These are birds somewhat out of their range. In both cases, people get very, very excited. And yes, Tim, you have the right answer again here. Masked booby and Nazca booby. Again, very, very similar birds. Look at the bill color, bright yellow in the case of the masked, and kind of, again, orangey yellow in the case of the Nazca booby. These birds are more frequently found in Central and Southern America, South America, excuse me, and kind of unusual to see in care, and definitely something that is a weirdo bird. The fourth bird on here is one that came in on a vessel, was found in the engine room of a Korean ship. Not sure where that bird entered the ship, but this is not an unusual thing. Birds, even like albatrosses, will sometimes land on a boat of some sort. It could be a shipping container ship or an oiler or whatever. And yes, that is a red-billed tropic bird. I'm going to challenge folks to try to beat Tim to the run. Tim knows many of these. So one more slide shows them all again. Black-legged kittiwake, masked booby, Nazca booby, red-tailed tropic bird. And I will say to folks, it's important to realize that while our experience comes most regularly with things like the Western grebes and Western gulls, the birds that we see in care frequently, we have to always hone our skills and be ready to deal with these one-off birds. How do they want it to eat? How do they handle in care? Most of the booby species, actually, quite interestingly, they are named boobies because they were thought to be dumb. They have a non-response in many ways to people, kind of a non-aversion. And in fact, they will frequently not eat from a bowl the way that a pelican or a gull will. And so what we do is called fish school, where you wave a fish in front of them, sometimes even throw it in the air until they learn that is food, and can learn to self-feed, and we will do assisted feeding until that is done. All right, so we have one more page of the unusuals, and this is really the graduate level. These are all birds that you would see most frequently in the deep sea. I put the two closest relatives on the left and on the right, and so let's just see if anybody can guess these birds. Very, very tiny ones on the left-hand side and slightly larger on the right. Any guesses for any of these? Yeah, these are definitely challenging. Yeah, there are storm petrels. So the first two are storm petrels, and I will give away that the second two are shearwaters. Again, birds that you would rarely see. Interestingly enough, storm petrels are night birds. They're very, very small. You can kind of see that when this one's in hand here. And when we release them, we actually need to release them at night, because otherwise they would get picked off by gulls and other predatory birds. So I'm going to go ahead. This is a really hard level. The first one is an ashy storm petrel. The second one is a Leach's storm petrel, which is actually an endangered species. When we get an endangered species, obviously we want to do as absolute much as we can to help that bird. Sometimes if a bird is unreleasable, we are able to find a placement for it. These are definitely the ones that get our stress level up really high. I've been talking a lot about the abundance of birds in the winter. I should also point out that is compared to spring and summer, when we have lots of babies, the number of birds is actually quite low. And what that means is we get a little bit more time, a little bit more resources to spend on each individual bird. And by chance, a lot of the birds we see in winter that have been beat up by storms and the other challenges I pointed out tend to be medical cases. Medical cases meaning there's usually a veterinary or surgical intervention that's needed, and a lot more challenging kinds of care. This is the kind of time where we get to really practice focusing on a smaller number of birds and unusual birds that you wouldn't see the rest of the year. And so you can see the other answer, black vented and sooty shearwater. So these are probably birds many of you, if you haven't been on a pelagic boating tour, you maybe have never even seen. And I guarantee if you have been on a boating tour, they're the ones whizzing by really quickly that you probably don't get much of a luxurious look at. All right. One of my favorite phenomenon for actually, I'm going to pause for a second just to say there's a question about a storm petrel. A storm petrel was rescued up here on the Mendocino coast and taken to the Santa Rosa Bird Rescue. Did it end up with you? Yes. I will say that any unusual water bird and any surgical case or oiled case of a water bird in a broad range, Mendocino all the way down to Monterey, inland to Sacramento, and then for the Southern California Center, it would be all the way to the bottom of San Diego County, the upper reaches of Ventura and San Luis Obispo, Orange County. All of those birds would end up with bird rescue. So I can't remember which one was found in Mendocino Coast, Tim. I'd have to look that up. Maybe if you drop me an email, I can see if I can find that information. All right. So one of my favorite phenomenon in the winter, again, small numbers of birds and unusual birds means that in the pools, in order to conserve resources, we end up with a mixture of unusual birds. So we can just go ahead and shout out in the chat what species you see. I see 1, 2, 3, 4. I see at least 4 species in this photo. Someone else might see a few others. Yep, lots of buffleheads, both male and female, giving that wonderful shiny color. I should use this moment to tell folks that we are doing an interesting cross promotion right now with a vegan nail polish maker in Florida. You can find the information on our website. And one of the 4 colors is called Bufflehead. It is a shiny greenish purple with sparkles in it. If you want to help support Bird Rescue, $1 per bottle goes to Bird Rescue. It's called Dimension Nails. Thank you, Ariana, for reminding me that. Yes, there are common golden eyes in here. There's a scaup. Anyone want to venture a guess of which kind of scaup? Is it a lesser or a greater? The color of the head and the shape of the head is giving it away on this one. The scaup is actually this bird right here. I can't, yes, that is a greater scaup, exactly right. All right, we have more fun with the mixed species. So another mixed flock. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 4 different species, 5 species actually. 5 species in this. Red-throated loon is correct. Ruddy duck on the left-hand side of the photo. Lots of western grebes. And actually, remember I said earlier, male and female? Ariana, can you see when I point with my pointer? Maybe I need to use a tool. Can you see my cursor?
No, oh, no, I cannot.
No, you cannot. Let me see if I can use the pencil. Here we go. Look at this bird. Look at the bill of that bird versus this one. This first bird is a female. See that slight bending upward and it's kind of narrow at the tip? And this bird, the bill comes out like a knife. That's a female right here, this one. And this one over here is a male. A kind of a fun tip. And I guarantee 99% of the birders you speak to will not know that tip. All right, so I'm just going to look back. We had a red-throated loon. Yes, there's a common murre, ruddy duck. This bird back here, I'm going to actually use my pen again. Actually, I can use a laser pointer. How does that work? This bird back here is kind of unusual. It kind of has a mix of the black below the eye is a definite western grebe. You can see that on most of these. This bird kind of has an above and below. There might be a mixed parentage here of a Clark's western grebe. That's something that we see, not uncommonly. And you can guess for yourselves whether there's males and females. That's exactly right, Devin. I believe that is a hybrid, something that we don't always catch in care. All right, turn the laser pointer off. All right, here's a video with a mixed group. This was actually taken just about 3 weeks ago. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think 5 different species. Let's see if we can figure these ones out. It definitely is a pied-billed grebe. There are murres. How about just these two right here? They're both scoters, but they're actually not the same kind. The one on the left is an easy one. That's a surf scoter. Not a black scoter. Really good guess. This one is really hard to tell because the plumage is really weird. That's actually a white winged scoter. I'm just going to have folks watch this one more time. So the surf scoter's on the left, then the white winged scoter, pied-billed grebe, whole bunch of murres, and then how about this little grebe over here? Did anyone name the grebe? Closet. There we go. Who's that on the right-hand side? There we go. Tim's got it. Horned grebe. Horned grebe versus eared grebe is one of the most challenging things to solve. In this case, it's that white almond-shaped cheek that is absolutely definitive for a horned grebe. Also, once you look at a bunch of them, and this is what I was saying earlier, where I don't even need binoculars anymore, there's kind of a dimension of the head to the neck. Eared grebes having a skinny neck that's usually dark, and horned grebes having comparatively a blockier head and a thicker neck. You think of the eared grebe as being quite petite and almost snake-like, and the horned grebe being a bit blockier. All right. This is the same one. We'll move on. Just want to show you a quick video. I'll take a look at remaining questions. This was meant to be kind of a light and fun. I hope you got to enjoy some of the species we see in winter, and that you will pick up hair ties and cut them, and cut your COVID masks. And again, not just your own. I think one of the key challenges is often we see litter on the ground and it makes us mad. I think what we'd love to see at Bird Rescue is it not only makes you mad, but makes you reach down and pick it up and put it in the right place. So here's a little video. And again, I'll be on the lookout for any remaining questions. I think that they speak to the little kid inside us. What kid hasn't watched a bird fly and not wanted to do that too?
I love birds because each bird is adapted to what it eats, how different their feet are.
I love so many birds. The birds that fly around with colors that look like paint to me. I love just the simple backyard birds.
They can do things that so many other species on the planet can't do. They can see so much more than other species can see.
My name is JD Bergeron. I'm the Executive Director of International Bird Rescue. We are a nearly 50-year-old nonprofit organization. Our history was in oil spill response, and we have responded to over 225 spills around the world. But we also work with injured, orphaned, wild aquatic birds year-round.
With an intake exam, they get a complete full physical exam just to look for any problems.
We have birds that come in from the public and from other centers. They are assessed here by staff and by our veterinarian. Our job here is basically just do whatever it takes to support the birds so they can heal, grow, and then become releasable.
There's so many things that can go wrong for them. The environment is very, very challenging. We've built the world around ourselves. We forget that there's literally tens of thousands of insects and birds and critters that are right around us.
I love getting to come here and work with the birds. They're all beautiful, but getting to see them up close is amazing. Being able to take care of nature is a beautiful gift.
You get closer in rehab to wild birds than you would anywhere else. And to be close up, perceiving them, perceiving you, that sort of eye contact, that connection, it's a pretty amazing thing.
Having those species, those birds come into care, seeing the issues, being able to problem solve and treat those issues, and then getting those birds back into the wild, I don't think anything else could compare.
Very recently, we got a report of a bird that we washed. This bird was in an oil spill in 1996. A bird that survived an oil spill and a wash, went out and had 23 years of life. Who knows how many young that bird brought into the world.
What we do at International Bird Rescue helps make sure that every bird has a chance.
So there's 3 little baby killdeer that we raise. We make sure everything looks good on them. And then if their flight feathers are fully grown out, we get them ready for release. Being able to see the releases happen, knowing that everything we did paid off, we were able to successfully get a bird back out into the wild to give it another chance at life. It's one of those warm, fuzzy feelings inside.
Every bird that gets released, it's really emotional for me. Our supporters, our donors, the staff, the volunteers, all these people line up to help get those 3 killdeer chicks back out in the wild. Every release is absolutely worth it.
I believe in human nature being responsible enough to do our part to make sure that we still always have a place for birds.
We dream of a world in which every person, every day, takes action to protect the natural home of wildlife and ourselves. There's so many things that we can do every single day, and what I hope for is that everyone chooses to do that. All right, I'm going to leave this final slide up while I answer the remaining questions. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. So I'm going to take these in no particular order. So Kat Ross asks, is there much of an issue with well-intentioned members of the public trying to care for birds before bringing them to IVR? Funny you should ask that. We have in care right now a few black-crowned night herons and snowy egrets that a well-intentioned person actually kept way too long instead of bringing them to professionals. Those birds actually have to be, first off, checked very, very carefully for malnutrition. A lot of folks don't know the proper foods to feed birds. Also, without the skills of professional wildlife rehab folks, you don't necessarily know how to prevent habituation. And so those birds are actually in isolation, learning that people are not a good thing. Again, it's usually folks meaning well, but not always knowing the right thing to do. In practice, the best thing you can do is to get that bird quickly and safely into care of professionals. You do not want to feed an animal. You don't want to keep an animal longer than overnight. And if you need help finding a way to get it into care, we've gone so far learning from a friend or a peer organization that actually pays for an Uber ride if the person can't get the bird into care. That is absolutely really critical. And I would say, Kat, further to that question, kidnapping of baby birds is a critical problem. We need help spreading the word. Ducklings on their own in a backyard, probably mom is nearby. If the space is safe and there's no cats or dogs or other risks, those ducklings are fine to be left there. Keep an eye on them. Ducklings in a street where cars are moving obviously is a different thing altogether. So I would say that it's absolutely yes, although I think the bigger challenge is people not even paying attention to animals in distress. From Yen Singh, would you detect these rescued birds if they had HPI? HPI being highly pathogenic avian influenza. Avian influenza has been around for decades, but the current strain, which is very deadly, hence the name highly pathogenic, has only been around a couple of years on the west coast of the US. It's now all over the world, actually started in Europe a few years back. It is absolutely critical that we detect for every single bird that comes to our centers before they enter the general population. They need to be checked. It is not a treatable or curable illness. In fact, it is a must euthanize at this point. It is our extreme honor and pleasure to be working on a point of contact test right now. Up till now, you actually have to take the test, send it off. 2 weeks later, you get a result. Just like in the early days of COVID, we all remember the days where we were in our car at the hospital waiting to have our nose jabbed to do that testing, and then the home test really changed everything. If we can prove out the effectiveness of this point of contact test, that will mean a lot more chances for birds who have maybe questionable symptoms, because unfortunately, lots of injuries, things like concussive force or traumatic injury, can look like the same neurological symptoms you see in bird flu. So yes, Yen Singh, that is a critical part of our work. Up till now, we have prevented bird flu from entering our center at all. And it has definitely caused a huge increase in the cost of the work we do, which makes our volunteers and our donor support absolutely critical to be able to do what we do. One last anonymous question here. What percentage of injured birds survive after being rescued? And what kinds of injured cases are the most difficult to rescue? It really varies so completely. What is the cause of the bird's admission? Ironically enough, a bird that is more covered in oil has a higher percentage chance of survival than one that has just a tiny little pinhole of oil. And that's because a bird that is more oiled is going to be seen by the public and picked up more quickly. Whereas I've actually literally seen on Birding California, which is a Facebook group of bird enthusiasts, just this past couple of weeks, I've seen a few photos posted of birds with oil on them that the folks who took the photo had no idea. So again, one of the things I ask of folks is to educate yourself on what is proper plumage. What does it look like when a bird is in a place it shouldn't be? In this case, a murre, a loon, or a grebe on the beach is generally not sunning itself. It is in trouble. It needs an intervention as quickly as possible. I would say the percentage to go a little further can be as high as 95%. I would say that most baby ducklings and baby birds that come into care are all you have to do is feed them, fatten them up, and wait for them to be ready to fly, to be released. And it's rather than by injury, I would say it's actually some species. Red-throated loons are exceptionally difficult to rehabilitate. Storm petrels are very difficult to rehabilitate. Birds that have very high stress levels when around humans, obviously that makes it a lot harder. You'd be amazed, though, the kinds of things that can be cured and fixed. And so I hate to generalize too much on that particular question. Okay, so Tim asked what email address to reach out. Why don't you send it to stormpetrel@birdrescue.org. I guarantee that will get to me, and it will also remind me to look up that question for you. So thank you, Tim. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Really appreciate you joining. And I think I covered all of the questions. Hope you have a great rest of your night. And do reach out to us. The email address, I believe, is outreach@birdrescue.org. Let us know what topics you'd like us to cover. For the sake of those of you interested in learning more about bird flu, you can go to our website and actually watch the recorded webinar we did just about a month or two ago. Thanks again. Take care. Have a great night.